Does talking to strangers make you happier? Could aging disgracefully help you live longer? I'm Dr. Michael Mosley, and in my Just One Long Thing podcast series, I'll be chatting to doctors and scientists. We'll be covering topics like sleep, exercise, happiness, and staying young, with each of our experts choosing a health hack they claim is the single most effective way you can improve your life. Just One Long Thing. Listen first on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Sutherland, and this is a special episode of the Scottish Football Podcast. With the top flight paused for the winter break, we're going to take a look back at the season so far, and what a 5 months or so it has been. There's been plenty of goals.
Corner left-hand side, swung to the back post, there's a header, and there's the goal from Lawrence Shanklin at the back post. Here's Shanklin, Jen scores! And Lawrence Shanklin does it again!
Not all scored by Lawrence Shanklin, but mostly scored by Lawrence Shanklin. There's been silverware lifted.
Don Robertson looks at his watch and blows for full time! Rangers win the League Cup! James Tavernier's the hero, as he so often is in the blue and white.
And Scottish football being Scottish football, there's even been the odd spot of controversy.
It's one of the worst games I've ever seen. I've been back here and I see the standard and I think, wow, any chance?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Joining me to pick the bones out of all of it today and review the season so far are our chief sports writer for the BBC in Scotland, Tom English. Good morning to you, Tom. Have the festive seasons drawn to a close? It is Thursday, the 4th of January. Have Tom English Towers closed business for the frolics?
Yeah, well, the Christmas tree is still up, and this is a source of much debate in our house. I'm a Christmas tree down man by the 4th of January, for goodness sake. My wife is not having any of that. She's keeping it up until the 6th. So she wins every battle in our house.
I think that she's got cause for that. She's just going to power through to the weekend, clearly.
Yes.
With a sherry glass in hand, I imagine.
She's still got her Christmas cracker hat on.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Ray Bradshaw, comedian and Partick Thistle fan, good morning to you. Happy New Year. Is it still okay to say Happy New Year at this point, Thursday the 4th of January, or has it become annoying?
It's annoying, but I'm more focused on the fact that Tom English has a day the Christmas tree must need to be taken down, like a date annually. It seems very insistent. Is it always the 4th every year?
No, well, it's supposed to come down on the 6th. The 6th is the deadline, right? Little Christmas and all that. But you kind of get to the stage where I just want to get my axe to the thing and throw it on the fire at this point. You know?
Yeah. I love the way you say deadline, like Fabrizio Romano is going to tweet about it. Like, there's no...
It's happening. The tree is coming down.
Also with us today, Phil Goodlad, BBC Sports presenter and journalist, and by dint of your name, Phil Goodlad, always top of Santa's list. But I must say, Phil, your festive season must have come to an end. I heard you on Good Morning Scotland this morning, navigating the always treacherous waters of Scottish football. It never stops getting choppy out there.
Nothing says the end of the festive spirit quite like the alarm going off at 4:05 and an old firm debacle involving the Scottish FA for us to navigate on the 4th of January. Yes, I have to say, Ray, having been around Europe many times with Tom English, whether it comes to being rugby or football trips, the domestic setup that he can speak to you about is something that you probably wouldn't believe, the number of things that he has to toe the line with. Such an outspoken, calls a spade when it comes to BBC Sport and to sport in Scotland. When it comes to the English household, Tom knows who the boss is, and it's not.
But Philip, Tom has an axe.
He has
and when I finish with the tree, I know where I'm heading next.
Can I ask you, just before we get into the nonsense of Scottish football, let's continue the nonsense with the trees. Do you have to placate your children by trying to plant said tree in the hope that it grows? Because I waste time every year either planting our thing or pretending I'm going to plant it and nothing happens.
No, I think we have very different lives. Like, not at all.
No. Phil, you see, the problem here is you're a bit of an oddball, and we're not.
Well, coming from the source, I think that's probably okay.
Plenty of oddball goings on to come over the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to keep it pretty simple. I have various categories here. I want nominations from each of our guests today for each category, and we'll see how many we can get through in the next half an hour, 20 minutes, or whatever it ends up being. First up, word of the season so far. What is the single word that you've either heard a lot so far this season, or that just sums up the season so far to this point? Tom English, let's start with you.
My word is quality. Brendan Rodgers has used it about 350 times, as in he needs more quality, not quantity. And also it opens up the whole debate about the quality of the league, which I think is being really poor this season. So that would be my word, quality.
Excellent stuff. Ray Bradshaw, for you, your word of the season so far.
I'm going to be cheeky here and use 3 words because it's something usually you hear people criticise a lot, but my 3 words are Lammers and Dessers. Because it's very rare you see scapegoated players happen joined together. Because it's always one, you always say, oh, he's let the side out, he's doing that. But I've heard the phrase Lammers and Dessers or Dessers and Lammers numerous times on Twitter, on any kind of punditry, just as they are the problem of what ended Michael Beale, essentially.
Philip Goodlad, your word of the season so far.
It has to be rubbish. The Derek Adams rant after the injury time defeat to Dundee, I think I must have added 40% of the figures clicking on to watching that rant, and every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. The standard of football is rubbish. It really is. If I'm a paying customer, I'm not coming back to watch that. I've left a team in League Two that's miles better than this team, miles no less. 26 days after Derek Adams returned to Ross County, he informs his own fans that he wouldn't come back to watch Ross County or Scottish football if he wasn't employed by Scottish football. And all this at a time when his chairman is trying to sell half-season tickets online on the very day, 26 days after Derek Adams returned to Scottish football, that he said that our standard of football is rubbish. That's my word of the season.
But on that point, and I love the Derek Adams rant as much as everyone else in terms of what you're describing as it almost being like a work of audio art. You find something new in it every time you listen to it. But also, I know he's just back in the door. Isn't it incumbent on the likes of Derek Adams and other managers to change that?
Perhaps not even change that, but know the standard of league that you're coming in. I mean, the quote here, we had the bottom team budget in League Two, and we're 100 times better than this one. 100 times, he says. I've left a team in League Two that's miles better than this team, and he repeats that bit as well again. Miles. It's almost as if Derek Adams has returned to his old club and didn't know both the standard in Dingwall or indeed the Premiership standard. I find it fascinating.
It's always the same when you go back to your ex and you realise the grass was greener the other way, and that's all that's happened. He's just realised that.
Yeah, although 26 days after returning to your ex, it's normally a bit longer, is it not?
You're something to tell the current Mrs. Bradshaw, Ray.
The thing about the Adams thing is that, to a large extent, he was right. I mean, I think he was over the top, but the league is a poor league this season, and we should be allowed to say it without being accused of talking down Scottish football by people on social media who constantly talking down Scottish football, apart from their own team. So he was over the score by a million miles, but the heart of what he was saying, I think, was correct. The problem was, one of the problems was that he did it after his team just got beaten. and it sounded like sour grapes. If he'd done it after a victory, he would have been on a much stronger footing. But it just sounded like a bitter rant from a manager who was annoyed. And as Phil says, slagging off his own team. Roy McGregor must have been hyperventilating at every sentence. Because, he was trying to sell half-season tickets for this rubbish product that nobody should come and watch.
There's a clear theme in terms of your word of the season so far from all three of you. Tom English, quality, Ray Bradshaw, Lammers and Dessers, and Phil Goodlad, rubbish. So clearly that's where you're at right now, full of bah humbug. So let's move on to your moment of the season so far, which presumably will be something ecstatic and thrilling and exciting. Ray Bradshaw, fill me with imagery.
No, not at all. My moment of the season was slightly just away from football, just slightly. So I do a lot of work for Jags for Good, brilliant Thistle charity doing fundraising food banks. We did a comedy gig at the Stand, and most of the audience went into the pub next door in Glasgow, and they were doing the Scottish Cup draw. And every team that came out, if it was an Elgin City, everyone's like, ooh, or whoever. It wouldn't have been Elgin because they lost to Genefield, but whoever it was, like a good away day. And then Ross County came out, and everyone in the pub was like, no. And then the next draw out was Partick Thistle. And honest, I've never seen PTSD in action. People were like screaming out. And like, I turned around and my mate Paul just had his head in his hands, just quietly. And that was my moment of the season because it sums up, even though that technically was last season, Dingwall has had an effect on all of us. So I'm glad they're rubbish.
I am sure it was horrible. But at the same time, Ray, that was possibly my favourite match of 2023.
It was insane. It was absolutely insane. I tweeted when we went 3-0 up with about 25 minutes to go and how good it was, getting sunburn. And then the next 19 minutes were the worst 19 minutes of my life. And I've done dreadful gigs in that time, Jonathan, and it still doesn't pale. It was the minute they score their first goal, Ross Docherty passes the ball out straight away from our centre. They go up and score. Honestly, Jonathan, horrific. So that going back to that's still my moment of the season, that cup draw.
Phil Goodlad, your moment of the season, please.
My moment of the season actually happened before a ball was kicked, and that has a Partick Thistle strong connection with it. I went down for Good Morning Scotland and spent half an hour in the stands with Chris Doolan ahead of the new season. Because not just what happened on the park in that playoff match, which was just bonkers, and if you want to sum up Scottish football in one match, that was it. But Chris Doolan had lost his father in the playoff run just weeks before that final. His whole family steeped in Thistle history. And what struck me was just ahead of the nonsense sometimes that we get in Scottish football on a daily basis, let alone throughout the season. It was just speaking to a guy who was speaking about how important football was to him, to his family, and how what he hopes to do on a day-to-day basis at Partick Thistle is in memory of those who's gone before him. And I was just struck by the calm before the storm, sitting in the stands with Partick Thistle just finishing one of their pre-season training sessions, speaking to Chris Doolan, not about football, but just about family, about life, about death. And it really struck me to such an extent that actually I have a sneaking look for a Partick Thistle result now at the weekend, as much for Chris Doolan and the time he gave me that day, the day before the season kicked off, than anything else. So, yeah, bizarrely, the moment of the season for me was before the ball was even kicked.
Very poignant, but enough of this Partick Thistle loving. Tom English, I'm sure your moment of the season does not involve Partick Thistle.
No, it actually involves our broth, bizarrely. Ali Adams.
Yeah.
I mean... I've watched that goal a million times. I don't know how many views that's had. I would suggest an awful lot around the world. Goalkeeper comes on, plays outfield, and he just, the ultimate have it moment. Rather than soaring out of the stadium and onto the street nearby, it's gone into the net. It's just a wonder goal that makes me smile every time I see it.
He absolutely leathers it. It was a thing of beauty and hugely significant from an Arbroath point of view. And who knows, maybe even in the title race in the championship. Right, let's move on now to your player or person of the season so far. Let's start with you, Philip Goodlad.
There's two players on the park that strike me every week. And when I come in to do GMS at the start of the week, we're always looking back and talking about these two, Bojan Majawski at Aberdeen and Lawrence Shankland at Hearts, two strikers who, it's not just that they score goals, it's that something happens when they're either on the ball or when they're making a run. You can't keep your eyes off them. My person, though, of the season, and he's only been in the game about 20 games, is actually Philippe Clement. And I'll tell you why. Because I think we all remember Rangers managers in the past who have that Rangers stare about them. You know, Walter Smith was the epitome of it. If you asked him a wrong question, if something went wrong, it didn't take a 60-second explanation in a post-match press conference. You just got a stare. Why use a sentence when a stare would do? I think Clement has that. I've been really struck by the change in feeling around Ibrox, and feeling being that it's a club that believes again. It believes that they can win the title. Although, given what happened last weekend when the Old Firm met, that might have been slightly dented. But Clement looks to me the real deal, and that's no disrespect to Michael Beale in the past. Michael Beale was a rookie manager who had a really good start, but maybe when push came to shove, didn't have that experience, that sort of zeal that's required. I think Clement does that, and I think it's shown in the results, apart, of course, from Parkhead last weekend.
Okay, Ray Bradshaw, your player or person of the season so far?
I always like watching tricky wingers, players that light up the game. I've always liked that. So he's someone I've noticed. I've only seen him play live a couple of times this season, but anytime on highlights, Danny Armstrong at Killie just seems quite exciting, taking people on, and it's something that is quite beautifully Scottish. A guy who's kicked around the leagues, Ross County, Raith Rovers, and he's at Killie, and now he's their go-to guy, and he is taking players on for fun. It's always exciting to watch, and you just want to see where he goes next, because the likelihood is it'll be a championship move in England, and then he'll fall away and come back on loan to Ross County and be called rubbish within about 20 minutes. So that's the career path he's probably got. So it's exciting watching him just now.
Interesting choices so far. I was thinking Tom English along the lines of maybe a Matt O'Reilly or probably a Lawrence Shankland. But who are you going to go for?
Well, O'Reilly, all the lads' suggestions are great. O'Reilly has been outstanding. Callum McGregor, for me, is the best player in the country. Consistently excellent. And we saw that in the Old Firm game. But it would be too boring for me to pick Callum McGregor, because I'd say for 11 of the last 12 seasons, I've picked Callum McGregor as my player of the year. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to go for Lawrence Shankland, because he deserves it, because his goals and the variety of goals that he gets, whether they're just knocked in at the back post or rifled in from outside the box, he's a complete package as a striker. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful player. And the percentage of goal involvement of Hearts' total league goals that are down to Shankland, it's somewhere north of 80%, you know. So I think it's around 80%. It's just stratospherically high. And I really hope that he goes to the Euros. With every passing week, his case becomes more compelling. In my mind, I wouldn't like to second guess Steve Clarke's mind, but surely Steve Clarke is going to bring him, isn't he?
Yeah, he's got to, surely. I know there's this school of thought that he's maybe not Steve Clarke's the striker kind of that he wants in terms of, does he prefer other strikers perhaps? But given his record, you'd have to say he's got to be on the plane. I think a lot of Scotland fans now questioning Ray whether he should be the main man up front.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you see Lyndon Dykes not scoring a lot. Che Adams similarly in the Championship. I think Dykes has got 3 league goals this season. Adams is something like 5. And when you look at Shankland, what I wanted to ask, because you guys all work in the media, so you know this a bit better. Majowski, Phil, you mentioned him earlier. Between him and Shankland, it looks like Shankland is the one that maybe Rangers and or Celtic might be having a look at. If you're Hearts, how much money does it take to tempt you to sell in this window? Because you know how much value European qualification. You look what Aberdeen got for the Conference League. How much money do you think it would take before they accept a bid?
I don't know, Ray, but I think they'll know the number when they see it, if they see it.
Oh, what a journalist answer! I love it.
But the fact is, as of last Friday, they haven't had any offers for Lawrence Shankland. Nothing, 0. And we keep talking about Rangers and Celtic and maybe other clubs involved. Nobody has put a bid on the table. That's not to say they won't this month, but nobody has. I think he's ideal. I think, you know, if you look at the strikers that Rangers have, I think Shankland is well ahead of all of them. Well ahead.
Yeah.
If you Celtic, slightly different picture. Kyogo is always going to be your number one striker there. Shankland instead of O, but is Shankland going to play second fiddle to Kyogo? I doubt it. I just think he's a perfect fit for Rangers. I don't want to be selling him under Hearts' noses, but I like it. But that's the bizarre thing, that they haven't had any offers at all for him yet.
Guys, we must crash on because we still need to get through 2 more topics, and let's kick off with your game of the season so far, Ray Bradshaw.
Game of the season is a tough one. I think, for sad reasons, the game I've enjoyed the most, if I was a neutral, and it sums up, again, sorry to go back to Partick Thistle, would be a Friday night game. I don't know if you did this one, Jonathan. We lost 4-3 to Wraith Rovers, and it was about 4 weeks ago. And it just sums up everything, end-to-end stuff, dreadful defending from both teams. And also, I was gigging that night, so I was hosting. So I went on stage and we were 3-2 up, and I came off stage 4 minutes later and we're 4-3 down. And it is just everything that is perfect about that. It'd be that one, or the game I've enjoyed most in person is, my dad's a Stranraer fan. I went to Spartans against Stranraer, and a man behind me kept on shouting, "Show him the cheese," which I later found out meant show him a yellow card. And it made my day so much, so much.
Wow, I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, show him the cheese. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Tom English, your game of the season so far?
Probably one of the 3-3 draws involving Motherwell. Either the Dundee one or the Ross County one. Not in terms of great quality, but loads of drama, late goal or goals, lots on the line for Motherwell. One of those would certainly sticks in my mind. There haven't been many. You could talk about Killy's victories over the Old Firm and that, but in terms of kind of drama and that, I think those Motherwell games were pretty exciting.
I'm enjoying these curveball answers to these questions, games I've almost forgotten about, but you're right, they've all got certain degrees of merit in terms of entertainment, dare I say it. Phil Goodlad, your game of the season so far?
I've really enjoyed the League Cup this season. The final was a bit of a washout, but the semi-final, Aberdeen Hibs, I thought was absorbing in the fact that it was almost straying into Derek Adams' territory of describing the game, because Aberdeen were absolutely battered by Hibs, and then had a man sent off with about 20 minutes to go. And we spoke about him earlier, the value of having a striker that can latch onto a ball, stick it in the back of the net. And when we were speaking about this, I was looking up the stats. My memory of that is that, as I say, Hibs battered Aberdeen, and yet Hibs only had 2 shots on target for the whole game. Aberdeen had 3, and 2 of those happened in the last 5 minutes. And I thought what was interesting about the League Cup this season, and that game probably shows it, is that there never seemed to be a match where you thought that was it, it's over. And had Hibs, I think, was it Martin Boyle had a goal chopped off in the semi-final by VAR. Had they have scored that, I think they probably would have steamrolled Aberdeen, given the way they were playing on the day. But the fact that Aberdeen held on and then sucker punched Hibs at the end, it was just an absorbing 90 minutes of the National Stadium, although it was wiped out with the final, because that was a total washout.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Final topic, and I think I can anticipate where a lot of you are going to go with this one. Your least favourite thing about the season so far, Tom English.
VAR, but not just VAR, everything around VAR. The endless discussions that we have about VAR, to the detriment of our analysis of the game and players. We're talking about it non-stop. Here we are again. Obviously, I've initiated this one, but just purely out of frustration. It's taken over the game. It has taken over the game. We're in the studio every Saturday, and it's VAR, 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 VAR. And I'm sick to death of it. I wish it would go away. I don't think it will, but I wish we could be rid of it. I think the supporter experience has deteriorated rapidly and dramatically. Very few supporters, I think, want it now. It's ruining their match day experience. And it's become farcical now. We have this latest spat with Rangers and the SFA over the Old Firm game and the Alistair Johnston handball, and everyone knows the story there. So you have Rangers issuing a statement which they're pointing out is not a statement. It's not a statement, it's just comment.
Comment.
And then you have SFA refusing to comment But they are commenting. They're just commenting off the record. They're briefing. It's a pantomime. It's a comedy show. And it's ridiculous. I'm just fed up with it.
On that point, some of the newspapers today reporting about how the Rangers have called on the Scottish FA to ban referee Willie Collum from all their future matches after claiming the governing body admitted that the VAR official was wrong not to penalise Alistair Johnston for that handball incident. What do you make of that? Surely that is a red line that the SFA can't countenance when you get to the point of clubs wanting to veto which officials take charge of their matches.
Yeah, I mean, if that's true, and the Rangers have asked for that, i.e. no Willie Collum involved in any of their games, I think it's outrageous. I think Willie Collum, I'm not a great fan of Willie Collum. I don't know how he didn't see that as handball, it being the VAR at the weekend, or why he didn't get the referee over to the monitor. I think he's made a lot of poor decisions, and I think he likes to insert himself into the action far too much. But for a club to say, oh, we don't want him, where's that going to lead to? So next week Celtic are going to say the same, then Aberdeen and Hibs and Hearts, and all of a sudden you run out of officials. It would be anarchy. But there's nobody's coming out of this with any credit. There's fault on all sides here. And it's just, it's kind of VAR inspired. And as I say, well, you may have picked up from my earlier comments that I'm not a fan of it. I absolutely was. And I keep saying this. I was full steam ahead for VAR for years. But I didn't envisage this. And maybe I should have done. Maybe that's a failing on my part. But it's deteriorated to a point now where I just think, it's obviously some of the decisions, the higher percentage of correct decisions are being made, but the price that football is paying for getting those right decisions is way too high as far as I'm concerned.
Ray Bradshaw, your least favourite thing about this season so far?
Yeah, you kind of have to go with Tom. It is VAR. It's learning new phrases like APP and what's that, attacking possession phase. Stop with all that kind of stuff. It's good. Most of the games I go to are Championship or League Two, so I don't get VAR in the games, and you forget sometimes when I'm down south. I was at the Newcastle game not long ago, and when VAR comes in, like Tom says, you get lost in the stadium. You don't know what's happening. The communication's so poor. It might flash up on the screen there. Hampden, it's been the same for Scotland games. I think it has to be that because, especially the time we're in now, Tom and yourself just covered about all the nonsense that's happening between Rangers and the Scottish FA. Well, Alistair Johnston is out singing Taylor Swift songs, which I quite enjoyed. He seems to not give a care about it. It just has to be that because the overall impact on Scottish football, even little examples like Aberdeen, I can forget who they were playing. They were 2-0 up and they lost 3-2. Rubezic gave a penalty in the last minute, and it's for stepping on someone's foot just on the edge of the penalty area, and it just takes away so much of the game. So it has to be VAR and everything around it, doesn't it?
Philip Goodlad, is that your least favourite thing about the season so far?
Apologies, but it's exactly the same. But mine is slightly more direct in the fact that as a fan, what VAR has done is made me not believe what I'm seeing. And what I mean by that is that we've all been watching football for 30, 40 years. We know what looks right and what looks wrong. Now, what we see with our eyes, the experience that we've had of watching football, now can't be believed. Because 90 seconds later, there's going to be a flash on the screen or there's going to be a flash in the stadium that says it's a VAR check. And for me, the very nature of football is it's 90 minutes plus maybe 3 minutes added on time. And it's fly by the seat of your pants, hear 'em, scare 'em, up and at 'em. Now we stop the game and you take the emotion completely out of it and it's an anticlimax. But even if your team is awarded the goal at the end of the VAR check, the adrenaline and instant euphoria has left your body. So it's almost like a false celebration because you've already celebrated 2 minutes ago or 3 minutes ago. And then at the end of it all, when you get into the 90th minute, the electric board goes up and we get 8 minutes of injury time. And sometimes that has a VAR check, which means that it goes on. So as a fan, it is that very, very direct consequence of I now cannot believe And I'm 44, so I can't believe what the last 40 years of watching football is now is teaching me, because I don't know in the next 90 seconds after the team has scored whether we have to have a VAR check, and all the letdown as a fan experience that has. It's, the problem is it's here to stay. It can't change. And if Scotland was to dismiss it, we'd be a backwater footballing country. But yet, do you remember the good old days when there was no VAR?
Well, you know what would happen if we scrapped VAR for next season? The next controversial incident that happened next season, people would be like, if only we had VAR.
This is rubbish. Rubbish without VAR.
Maybe or maybe not. Right, we better wrap things up now. My thanks to Tom English, who's about to cut down his wife's Christmas tree, Philip Goodlad and Ray Bradshaw. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you for listening. And do get your emails into scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. We'd love some questions to get our teeth into. And if there's anything we missed in our review of this season so far, or if you'd like to add your own nominations, let us know. And we'll be publishing report cards on every Premiership club throughout the winter break. So follow and subscribe to the Scottish Football Podcast to make sure you do not miss an episode. Scottish Football, the gift that keeps on giving. Thanks for listening.
Just a quick word to say the Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English for everything you need to know about the world of Scottish rugby. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.